I sought refuge in the living silence of the taiga after my heart was broken. But when my betrayer came seeking to exploit its sacred secrets, he found not a victim, but the forest's fury itself. The silence of the taiga is a funny thing. Out here, where the pines stand like silent giants and the nearest village is a 2-day walk, you'd think it would be quiet, but it's not. It's a living, breathing silence, filled with the whisper of pine needles, the snap of a distant twig, the low growl of something you hope is just the wind. I've learned to read this silence like a book. It was the noise of the human world that I could no longer stand, especially the sound of his voice echoing in my head, turning my memories to poison. You have to understand, Dmitri wasn't just a man I loved. He was the outside world, a world of science, of cities, of concrete and logic that had somehow found its way to my small corner of Siberia. I was the village healer. My grandmother taught me, and her grandmother taught her. My hands know the language of herbs, the secrets of roots, the way to set a bone with nothing but birch bark and a prayer to the forest spirits. People came to me with their fevers, their heartaches, their fears. I was part of the rhythm of this place, as much as the river and the seasons. Dmitri was a geologist, sent to survey the mountains. He had eyes the color of the summer sky just before a storm, and a laugh that could startle birds from the trees. He was fascinated by me. He called me his forest witch, but he said it with a smile that felt like sunshine. He'd sit for hours in my small izba, watching me grind herbs with my mortar and pestle, asking questions about every leaf, every tincture. He learned their names, their properties. He seemed to respect it, to cherish my world as something unique and precious. I thought he was learning my heart. I was wrong. He was taking inventory. The betrayal wasn't a whispered confession or another woman's scent on his collar. It was colder than that. It was a file on his laptop, left open by mistake. A contract. A proposal to a big pharmaceutical company in Germany. It detailed the potent regenerative properties of a very specific, very sacred compound I made. It was called Rodovaya Sila, ancestors' strength. It wasn't something I gave out for coughs or fevers. It was a last resort, a gift from the earth that my family had guarded for generations, used only when life was truly hanging by a thread. He had broken into my grandmother's chest, stolen the last of the dried root, and was planning to sell its secrets. My entire lineage, my sacred trust, reduced to a patent number and a price tag. When I confronted him, the sunshine in his smile was gone. He didn't even have the grace to look ashamed. "Anastasia, be reasonable," he'd said, his voice calm, rational, infuriating. "This is bigger than your superstitions. This could save thousands of lives and make us rich." "It's not for sale," I whispered, the words feeling like shards of glass in my throat. "It's a trust. It's my family." He actually scoffed. "It's folklore, Anna. Quaint stories. I'm offering you the real world and you're clinging to dirt and leaves." That was when my heart didn't just break. It turned to stone. He hadn't just betrayed me. He had invalidated my entire existence. My love, my beliefs, my ancestors. He saw it all as a commodity, a quaint story to be sold. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply turned, walked out of my home, and headed east into the deep, unforgiving green of the taiga. I took nothing that reminded me of him, just my knife, a flint, and the small leather pouch of essential herbs that never leaves my side. I didn't look back. The man I loved was a ghost, and he had turned my home into a graveyard. That was 3 months ago. The summer has bled into a crisp, cold autumn. I've survived. I've remembered the old ways, the true ways. I track game. I find water. I know which mushrooms will feed you and which will kill you. The forest is a harsh mother, but she is an honest one. Her dangers are plain to see. A bear doesn't pretend to love you while it plots to steal your soul. I thought the pain would fade out here, scoured away by the wind and the cold. But grief is a stubborn root, and loneliness is its own kind of winter. Last night, something changed. I was huddled by my small, smokeless fire, chewing on dried elk meat, when a feeling washed over me, a cold dread that had nothing to do with the dropping temperature. It was the feeling of being watched. I scanned the impenetrable darkness around me, my hand tightening on my knife. I saw nothing, heard nothing but the usual night sounds, but I couldn't shake it. This morning I found tracks, not far from my camp. Not an animal, a boot print. Heavy, deliberate, too large to be mine. But that wasn't what made the air freeze in my lungs. I knelt closer, my heart hammering against my ribs. There, in the damp earth, barely visible but unmistakable, was the scent, faint, chemical, and sickeningly familiar. It was the smell of his cologne, the one he wore when he wanted to remind me he was a man of the real world, a world that had no place here. Then I heard it, a cough, a human cough, trying and failing to be muffled by the vast, silent trees. He had found me. My blood didn't run cold. It turned to ice. In a single fluid motion, I extinguished the tiny flame of my fire with a handful of damp earth and melted back into the shadows of the ancient cedars. The forest had taught me how to be invisible, how to be just another shadow, another whisper of wind. My knife felt like an extension of my own hand, its cold steel a familiar comfort. He coughed again, closer this time. A wet, racking sound that spoke of city lungs struggling with the pure, sharp air of my world. He stumbled into the small clearing where I had camped. The sight of him stole the breath from my lungs. This wasn't the Dmitri I remembered, the confident man with storm-blue eyes. This man was a wraith. His expensive jacket was torn, his face was gaunt and scratched, and a desperate, hunted look had replaced his easy arrogance. He looked small here, swallowed by the immensity of the trees. He looked like a child lost in the dark. For a fleeting, foolish moment, a pang of pity shot through me. I crushed it instantly. Pity was a luxury I could no longer afford. "Anastasia," he called out, his voice hoarse, uncertain. It cracked in the stillness. "Anna, I know you're here. Please, I made a mistake." I remained silent, my back pressed against the rough bark of a pine, my breathing slow and steady. I was a predator now, and he was the clumsy prey that had wandered into my territory. He sank down onto the log where I had been sitting, burying his face in his hands. The company, they couldn't replicate it. The sample I took, it was inert, useless. They said the chemical markers were all there, but it had no effect. It was just dead root. He looked up, his eyes scanning the dark trees around him, searching for me. "It's you, isn't it? It needs you. Your whatever it is you do. Your blessing. Your touch." The words were a confirmation of what my grandmother had always taught me. The Rodovaya Sila wasn't a chemical formula. It was a pact, a living connection between the healer, the plant, and the spirit of the land. It couldn't be stolen, only given. His science had failed him. I decided to show myself. Stepping from the shadows, I was no longer the soft, loving woman he had known. The taiga had stripped me down to my core, leaving only what was essential, what was strong. I held my knife loosely at my side, not as a threat, but as a statement. His eyes widened when he saw me, a mixture of relief and fear. "Anna, thank God. I've been looking for you for weeks." He stood up, taking a step towards me. "Stay where you are," I said. My voice was low, calm, but it held the chill of the coming winter. It stopped him dead in his tracks. "I'm sorry," he said, the words rushing out of him. "I was a fool, arrogant, I see that now, but I need your help. It's not just about money anymore. The head of the company, his son is sick, very sick. The doctors have given up. This is their last hope. Your gift could save him, Anna. Please." I stared at him, my face a mask of stone. He was still trying to use my own heart against me. The appeal to my nature as a healer, the story of a dying boy. But I saw the truth in the twitch of his eye, in the desperate tremor in his voice. This wasn't about saving a life. This was about him saving his own skin. The spirits of this forest do not answer to the demands of rich men, I said, my voice echoing slightly in the clearing. The gift is not a tool. It is not a commodity. You desecrated my home. You betrayed my trust. You tried to sell my soul. There is no forgiveness for that here. I gestured with my knife towards the direction he had come. Leave. Go back to your world of concrete and greed, and never return. This is your only warning. For a moment, he just stared at me, his face a canvas of disbelief. The pity, the desperation, it all just melted away. The handsome, arrogant man I had fallen in love with reappeared, but this time his features were twisted into a cold, ugly sneer. He let out a short, sharp laugh that was completely devoid of humor. "Warning?" he repeated, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone. He slowly raised his left hand to his mouth and let out a shrill, piercing whistle that cut through the sacred silence of the night. From the darkness all around me, shadows detached themselves from the trees. They weren't specters or spirits. They were men. 4 of them, dressed in dark tactical gear, holding things in their hands that glinted in the faint moonlight. They weren't carrying geological tools. They were carrying rifles. Dmitri looked at me, his storm blue eyes now as cold and dead as a frozen lake. "I tried to be reasonable, Anastasia," he said, his voice laced with a terrible, triumphant cruelty. "I really did. But you're right. This isn't your world anymore. It's mine." The metallic click of a rifle's safety being switched off was the only sound that broke the standoff. It was a profane noise in this ancient place, a sound of cold, hard death. Dmitri's men fanned out, their movements professional and menacing. They were creating a cage of barrels, with me at its center. They saw a lone woman with a knife. They saw an easy victory. They had no idea what they were standing in. "You don't get to choose, Anna," Dmitri said, his voice dripping with condescension. "You're going to come with us. You're going to prepare the remedy for the boy, and then you're going to teach their chemists how to do it. You see, your pact with the land can be replicated. It just needs the right motivation." I didn't look at the men. I kept my eyes locked on his. I let him see the last flicker of the woman he thought he knew die out, replaced by something older, colder, and far more dangerous. "You think these men and their loud sticks frighten me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, yet it carried through the clearing. I have faced the winter's hunger, the bear's rage, the forest's unforgiving soul. You are just a man, Dmitri, a weak, greedy man who has brought his weakness here. I took a slow step backward, my feet finding the familiar moss and earth. You came looking for a healer. You found something else. Dmitri chuckled, a hollow sound. Enough of the theatrics. Take her. As the first man moved towards me, I did something they didn't expect. I didn't raise my knife to fight. I drove it deep into the soil at my feet. Then I threw my head back and let out a call. It wasn't a human sound. It was a long, ululating cry that was part wolf howl, part hawk scream, a sound that I had only ever used to communicate with the deepest parts of the taiga. It was a call of distress, a violation, a call for aid from the only allies I had left. The forest answered. At first, it was subtle. The wind picked up, howling through the pines, not with the gentle whisper of before, but with a furious, mournful shriek. Branches began to creak and groan as if under immense strain. Dmitri and his men exchanged uneasy glances, their rifles wavering slightly. They thought it was just a squall. Then came the eyes, dozens of them, then hundreds. Tiny pairs of green and gold lights winking into existence in the impenetrable darkness beyond the clearing. Wolves. Not just a single pack, but every pack within hearing distance, drawn by a call older than any man. A low, guttural growling began to build, a terrifying symphony that vibrated through the very ground they stood on. One of the men nervously aimed his rifle into the darkness, his finger twitching on the trigger. "What is that?" he stammered. "Stay calm," Dmitri yelled, though his own voice was tight with fear. "They're just animals." But they weren't just animals. They were the guardians of this place, and I was their kin. As the first wolf, a huge silver-backed alpha, stepped silently into the edge of the clearing, the man panicked. He fired. The shot was deafening, a sacrilege in the night. The bullet tore through the great wolf's shoulder, and it went down with a pained yelp. That was their final mistake. The forest exploded. The tide of glowing eyes surged forward. It wasn't a battle. It was a reckoning. The men's shouts of terror were swallowed by snarls and the sickening sound of tearing flesh. Gunshots rang out wildly, but for every wolf that fell, 3 more took its place, a relentless gray wave of teeth and fury. Dmitri stood frozen, his face ashen, watching his civilized world get ripped to shreds by the raw, untamable power of mine. He finally turned to me, his eyes wide with utter terror. He saw me not as Anastasia, the healer, the lover he betrayed, but as I truly was, a daughter of the taiga, an embodiment of its ancient spirit. I pulled my knife from the earth, the blade now humming with a strange energy. I walked towards him, the chaos swirling around us as if we were in the eye of a storm. He stumbled backward, tripping over a root and falling to the ground. He looked up at me, a broken, pathetic thing. "Please," he whimpered. "Anna, please." I knelt beside him, the scent of his fear thick in the air. "You wanted a real world, Dmitri," I said, my voice calm amidst the carnage. "Welcome to it." I didn't kill him. Death would have been a release. Instead, I pressed the tip of my knife to the side of his neck, just enough to draw a single drop of blood. I whispered a word his science could never analyze, a curse my grandmother taught me for those who poison the sacred, a curse of exile. I stood and walked away, not looking back. The wolves would not touch him. They would let him live. But the forest would never let him leave. He would wander these woods forever, haunted by the spirits he mocked, tormented by a silence that would scream his betrayal back at him for all eternity. He would become another one of the taiga's ghost stories, a warning to those who came bearing greed in their hearts. I walked until the sounds of the feeding frenzy faded behind me. The moon broke through the clouds, bathing the trees in silver. I was alone again, but I was not lonely. I was whole. I had been heartbroken, but the taiga had mended me with tooth and claw, with wind and silence. I had vanished into these woods to escape a broken heart, but I had found my soul instead. My name is Anastasia, and this is my home. I am its healer, its daughter, and its fury, and I am never, ever leaving.